riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
Hey everybody, Brad Chappell here. We're back at Grizzly Jig Show 21. I can first off say if you have not been to this location yet, it's pretty impressive, huh, Steve?
Oh, Lord have mercy. This building is something else now. I mean the craftsmanship and the walls and the ceilings and it's just, you need to come and see it. I mean, that's the only way I can explain it, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's purely amazing. It is a crappie fishing heaven. You can spend hours in here, and
You
I
sure
don't think
can.
you can find everything. I mean, it's got everything.
If you can't find it here, you're not going to find it anywhere.
You don't need it.
You don't need it. No, sir.
But also here, I really want to take time and appreciate you coming on board here. This is Officer Shelton.
Yeah, Brian
and
Shelton.
He's with the Department of Wildlife in Missouri here.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about just, conservation of crappie fishing. Some of the things that real big right now is, the new big thing is live scoping.
Yep, live scope. That's
There's a lot of guys really concerned that it's going to hurt crappie fishing, by taking out these big fish. And, just want to kind of touch on that with you guys and see what's happening on your end on that.
right. Yep. Yeah, and we're seeing a big uptick in it. I mean, it's kind of like anything else. You see the price tag on it, and it pushes
Yeah.
a lot of people away. But the more stories you hear and the more pictures you see, the more that your wallet loosens up a little bit.
It definitely must have, because that's a lot of guys doing it right now.
Absolutely.
But, what would be advice that you would give fishermen out there if they're starting to see, some lakes get affected?
My personal advice is, you start seeing a decline, stay in close contact with your fisheries biologist. Those guys are the ones that definitely have their finger on the pulse. They're trap netting, they're shocking fish. They're doing a lot of population studies. They're doing a lot of aging of fish, trying to figure out what year class that we have, if we're having issues of overpopulation, stunted growth, compared to over harvest or something like that. So those guys know really well, and us as conservation agents, we stay in really close contact.
Yeah, you
with
guys
them.
are the public.
Yeah, absolutely. We're the ones that hear the public opinion, the good, the bad, the ugly. And we pass that information on and let them know what the public's seeing, because a lot of times people don't know who the biologist is. He might be covering 16 counties or something like that, and there's one of us conservation agents, at least one of us in every county. So we're hearing the concerns from the public, and we know that kind of the good, the bad, and all that stuff, and pass that stuff on. But as far as my advice is that if you're seeing it, me personally, you're catching a lot of big fish and stuff. I mean, unless you just absolutely are starving for crappie, I mean, what does it hurt to toss that big one back?
Right,
right. Wapapello Lake, which is our closest big crappie fishing lake here in southeast Missouri, close to the Boot Hill. It's Butler and Wayne County. They had a regulation change this last year, maybe 2 years ago now. What we have in that lake, the situation we have there is we have whites and blacks. And of course the blacks they grow a lot slower than the whites. And years ago there was a 9-inch length limit on it, which compared to Mississippi, that's
Right.
that's quite a bit shorter. But a 9-inch length limit, and what that did is that it actually allowed the black crappie to overpopulate because they're so slow growing. I mean, you couldn't buy a 9-inch black crappie. So now they did a regulation change there, and it is a 30 crappie limit for the day, your possession limit for the day, but you can only possess or catch and keep 9 over.
No, we're
Or I'm sorry, 15 over 9. So that allows what they're trying to promote or hoping to promote is the take of those smaller fish, which more than likely are going to be the blacks,
right.
and try to thin that population out to kind of let them grow a little bit more. So that's the thought behind it. And talking to folks that are fishing that lake, I mean, they're seeing, I think this regulation's been in place for about 2 years now, but they said that they're seeing a little bit of a turnaround on it too. So,
What other, is that the only lake that's been adjusted here lately, I guess you would say?
yes, our close lake here in the Boot Heel is Jerry Paul Combs Lake, which is over by Kennett, Missouri. It's just a small little 150-acre lake, and the crappie fishing is kind of like a roller coaster there. I mean, I remember probably 6 years ago on a 150-acre lake, there was 90 to 100 boats on it at one time. I mean, the crappie fishing was fantastic. And then, of course, it took a nosedive after that year.
Right.
But we're seeing a rebound now on it. But as far as daily limits, we haven't changed anything like that. You know, the Mississippi River is big fisheries here. Guys used to crappie fish it a lot. Steve could probably tell you that for sure. I mean, but I'm not seeing the crappie fishermen on that river that I used to. A lot of people still crappie fishing on the St. Francis River, which is on the west side of the Boot Heel between us and Arkansas, running yo-yos and things like that, and just a little bit different tactics over there, but still a lot of locals are fishing it. So, but as far as regulation changes to daily limits, we haven't seen a whole bunch of it here in Southeast Missouri.
What is the daily limit? Oops, excuse me. What is the daily limit here in Missouri?
It's 30
30
a day.
a person.
Yeah. The only exceptions on those would be a public water that has a different limit. So like Wapapello Lake, where it is 30, but you can only keep 15 over 9. So any special regulations for that body of water, but overall it's 30 a day for the state of Missouri.
What about, somebody sees a violation that somebody's, how did they get a hold of you guys? Because, I mean, we're out there every day.
Absolutely.
Or a lot of guys are out there every day fishing.
Well, and this is a story that I tell everybody. In the state of Missouri, and I kind of hate telling our secrets, but there's less than 200 of us in the state, and probably 40 of us are command staff. So we're looking at, 160 or less guys, boots on the ground doing game warden work. And when you have a situation like that, we rely very heavily on the public. We have to have eyes out there to see things and to give us information. So we're very community oriented. Not that other law enforcement isn't, but I mean I'm sitting here doing a podcast with you, and we're doing programs in schools and civic groups, and I have one with a women's club on Monday night. So it's one of those deals where we get out there, we need to be seen. We're kind of like a unicorn. I'm the only conservation agent in Pemiscot County. I cover 500 square miles and 50 miles of the Mississippi River.
That's a lot of road.
So, I mean, I have to have good community support, and I have to have somebody to keep an eye on us. Missouri is pretty interesting in the fact is we don't have our own dispatch center. So we are issued a state cell phone, and those numbers are public. You look in the back of any turkey pamphlet, deer hunting pamphlet, it's the phone number of every game warden in the state of Missouri. So we're pretty easy to get a hold of us. We also have an Operation Game Thief hotline, which most states do, and they have rewards and things like that for turning people in that are messing up, catching over limit or shooting deer at night or whatever
Right.
it may be. What is really interesting, and this is kind of, especially with the way that our country is now, and some people feel like they're losing hope. I don't, because we get a lot of OGT phone calls from people that have never met a conservation agent before. They just see somebody doing something wrong and they know that they need to say something. And one of the questions that's asked is, would you like a reward?
Mm-hmm.
I've been in Pemiscot County for 10 years. And I've made some amazing cases of, commercial turtling and stuff like that that's illegal here, big poaching stuff with deer and things like that, shooting ducks at night, road hunting, snow geese and things like that. And every single one of them that is called OGT and called it in, when they're asked if they would want a reward, they say no.
That's right.
They're not doing it for the money.
Right.
They're doing it because they respect the resource, they enjoy it,
Right.
and they want to make sure that it's there for their future, their kids and their kids and things like that. And that really gives me hope, in humanity and people knowing the right things to do and really enjoying our resources, because
We got to protect them.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
this is something. I seen a saying not too long ago, and it's these resources aren't ours; they're just ours to use now.
Right.
So they're going to be here. Hopefully, if we do it right, they'll be here long after we're gone. So it's just kind of, that's my soapbox anyway.
No, definitely. No. Yeah, that's why we got you here, is to kind of, spread the word on conservation as far as crappie fishing goes. And I'm sure, Steve, you've got some concerns about the new generation of crappie fishing, or what's your standpoint right now?
Well, just like the electronics we got, like the Garmin Live Scope.
Yeah.
It's I hear a lot of people say, "Man, that's cheating,"
Right.
But it really teaches you, if you study that fish, exactly what their habitat is. It teaches their lifestyles, what stumps, flats, or anything else. But we talk about one of the concerns is everybody's keeping all the big fish.
Right.
What I'm seeing now is they are catching a lot of big fish, but more people now are starting to release those big fish. Just like myself, I spent all winter long on Reelfoot Lake, and I have caught some of the biggest fish I've ever seen there, and I've lived there all my life.
Right.
I didn't know those fish were there. For some reason, well, let me back up just a little bit. The big fish, the trophy fish, it's
Right.
just like a trophy deer.
Right.
He don't get that big by being dumb.
Right.
He is a smart fish. By studying these big fish on that live scope, when you approach that 20 to 25 foot mark from those fish, those older big fish, they'll turn and swim away from you.
Mm-hmm.
They don't let you get that close to them. So what these guys out here right now are trying to learn how to catch these fish at a longer distance,
Right.
But like I said, they're catching those big fish and they are releasing them, I'll go out and I'll catch 30 fish in a day's time at Reelfoot. And,
He's done that forever, though.
a 260 or 240 at Reelfoot is unheard of.
Yeah.
And I have caught a bunch of them. And when I catch one, I feel sorry for him. I look at him, a big old fish,
Right.
thick back, full of eggs right now. Hey, you got to put them back in there,
Yeah.
Take a picture, that'll last a lifetime.
Right.
You don't have to put them in the freezer.
Right.
If you're going to eat a fish, have a 10 or 12 inch fish off Reelfoot or any lake, and you can only eat so many, it's
That's my take on the new technology is, we want everybody to get into fishing.
Absolutely.
We want everybody to enjoy the sport and enjoy the resource. We also want to think about the future and, preserving it as well. We don't want to decimate this, the older fish class,
Right.
or even the population. But so that's the stance that, we're taking, is getting it out to everybody. Hey, man, take that picture.
Right.
Have fun. Catch some fish.
I'm gonna tell
eat
you.
some fish.
I'll tell you a little story about some fish. I talked about before we started this how the fish are like a family. Ronnie and I were on Grenada Lake, Mississippi, and we're trolling. And you see 2 or 3 fish that's together, and you put that hook right there where they're at. They don't bite it. They know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
You get 2 more fish to swim in with them from another direction, and when they get close, they grab that bait to keep those other 2 fish from getting it. So there's got to be some type of family clash or something. Something's going on under that water that we didn't realize was happening.
That's just crazy even to comprehend.
But you see how smart these fish are, so they've got to be thinking. You
Yeah.
know. So take care of them. You
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Well, and what I think that's kind of neat about the technology is, say you take a deer hunter that goes out and scouts and watches deer all the time. He's putting out trail cameras and getting pictures to know exactly what he has out there. Or your duck hunters or your goose hunters that scouting to see where the feeds are to try to hunt them and stuff like that. All that stuff has been here for years because we can see it with our own two eyes. What's below that water is a mystery, and for a long time, and you're actually being able to see that now with live scope. And you're like Steve said, I mean, you're learning behavior of fish that you've never even thought that you would know in your lifetime.
Right. That's our trail camera now.
That's your trail camera.
That's our
Absolutely.
trail camera. Hey, we find these big fish, and a lot of times I don't catch those big fish.
That's right.
If you know you're going to fish a tournament at a later date, don't try to catch
That's
those
the last
fish.
thing you want to do.
During a tournament, you can pull up there and catch them, because they're going to be released at the end of that tournament. So that's our trail camera, just respect them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's neat, and I think the thing that I think is cool about it is the fact that you're learning that behavior, and you have more of a personal connection with those fish.
Have you got to experience it on the water
I've
yet?
seen it. I mean, for our state boats or our patrol boats, we have side scan and things like that, and it's cool to see that. But to see live scope is pretty interesting. I mean, it's
It is actually mind-blowing, the fish in their natural state that we've never known before, like you said about the trail cams and everything else. But it is blown away my way of thinking.
And you take someone that's never seen it,
yeah,
just watch their reaction when you tell them to drop that hook on that fish. I mean, it's just they're just in awe.
Yeah.
What about how would you advise somebody? We talked about a second ago about taking a picture and fish care. What would you recommend somebody as far as handling fish? And I'm gonna go back to the same question with Steve here.
Yeah. I mean, my advice would be to, in the state of Missouri, you have our regulation is that if you're not going to keep the fish, that it has to be released to the water immediately, unharmed. So it needs to be pretty quick.
So you don't need to put them in a boat and then in the day take pictures.
Right. We have calling regulations for fish tournaments, but that's it. I mean, you put it in the boat, that's your fish. It's not coming back out. You can't throw it back because you just caught a bigger one. I'm talking day-to-day fishing. I'm not talking about tournaments. But, take that picture real quick. Handle that fish as little as possible to be able to get your shot. Make sure that if you don't mind background, make sure you got your right scenery ready and all that stuff. A lot of guys you see is marking that background out to hide their spot that they're fishing at. But I would say get your picture and release it back as quickly as you can. To increase that survival rate of that fish.
Yeah, because that fish, he breathes in the water. If you can hold your breath and you get in the water, you see how long that you got to get back out of that water.
Absolutely.
He's got to get back in that water.
Right.
And that's causing him damage the longer he's out.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
What would you advise? The same thing?
Yeah, just
Because I know you've caught probably 1 billion crappie right now.
it's I've caught a bunch of crappie, but as you get older, you respect them a little more.
Yeah.
Hey, you put them all back in there.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna take a picture with a fish and then you want it to survive, that's the main thing for releasing it is to let it survive. So I've changed the way as far as even unhooking them and holding them and releasing them back in the water. You just don't want to toss it back out there.
Right.
You wanna take some care with it.
I got a pet peeve. I get on Facebook sometimes and you see all these pictures of fish that's been caught on guide trips laying on the back of a tailgate. That just, boy, it burns me up, But that's, it's legal to do that, from their standpoint. But from trying to put these babies back in the water and let them grow up and have billions or more.
I know, and it's some talking, I know it's a whole different state that some of the guys in the South are wanting to kind of institute. And I was wondering if it would be even legal in Missouri is these guys are wanting to tag fish. And say I'm a guide in Mississippi, but we're going to pretend right now I'm in Missouri. Can I place a tag into a fish and just kind of say, hey, this fish has been caught by Brad Chapel Guide Service, but we're released it?
Right. There are regulations in place for it. I'd have to, and I can look it up real quick and double check. But yeah, I have it right here in my pocket. But yeah, we do have regulations as far as tagging and releasing fish goes. But yeah, I can, if you don't mind talking for a little bit while I look it up just to double check and make sure. I mean, that's not something that I deal with every day.
Yeah, it's something that I heard this morning actually that these guys are wanting to do, and of course they're going to have to figure out if it's legal in that state or not. But people are really getting the mindset when it comes to even guiding, to protecting more and more. And it used to be, hey, you go catch a bunch of fish in the springtime and fill your freezer up and.
But talking about the tag fish, I've been through that part, where I've caught plenty of tag fish.
Yeah.
Once you tag a fish, most of the time that tag that's in that fish's meat causes an infection. And I don't think they will survive much longer, unless that tag's removed. And like I said, I've caught plenty of them like that, and it's a thing that people are doing right now, but it does cause an infection in that fish. Because it's a foreign body that's in his in him.
It's
so
pretty abrasive thing.
Yeah, so it's got its good points and bad points. You can keep up with how the fish does. If he's caught again, but he may not survive.
Another thing would be interesting to ask, definitely you, Steve, is keeping logs. How many log books do you do? A lot of logging?
I used to do a lot of that, but right now it's these electronics and stuff like that, cell phones, pictures. They got dates on them. Exactly what you caught. It's keeping up with the water temperature, the water level is to me is the most important thing. Especially in catching a lot of fish in the springtime, because I feel to think that it's the water temperature for the spawn means a lot. But the number of daylight hours in a day is what triggers it, I think.
I've heard today, and we're talking end of January, fish at Lake Washington already in the trees.
Yeah. Well, I just got back from Florida last week, and it was slamming down there now.
It's full-fledged spawning?
It was full-fledged going on. We caught the big fish in the tournament 312. It's
good Lord.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Black crappie,
big black crappie, golden eyes. Yeah, beautiful.
I love those fish.
Yeah, if you have never been to St. Johns River, you need to take one trip during the springtime.
Well, how'd you fish? We'll touch on that one.
Well, I started out live scoping. That's the thing to do it. But we grew up on trolling.
You do have your own pole.
I do, yeah. Well, it's like sitting in the garage one night with a friend of mine, my neighbor there, and we're cooking fish, and we look at each other. Let's go to Florida. We jump a truck, have one day of practice, we'll go to Florida. Pull out the live scope. Hey, I'm good at this now, and sure, I've seen a lot of fish on live scope. That water down there is shallow, most of it is.
Right.
About midday of the first day of the tournament, I said, let's put them trolling poles out. Let me tell you something. I should have had them out all day long, because the rest of that day and the second day of the tournament, it was slamming. Big fish, big blacks. So trolling's not over, I'm gonna tell you. It's got a time and a place for a live scope as well as trolling. So you better do both of them,
Yeah, you gotta keep your options out there.
You better, or you're gonna get beat.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So I figured out the tagging stuff. And, we do have a tag and release fishing promotion permit. It's pretty heavily regulated, but it's the wildlife code says to engage in tagging and releasing fish in association with a fishing promotion contest or other event. The fee of it's $250. And the tag and release fishing promotion permits the authorized holder of the tag to release one fish in an impoundment of the state in accordance with the following. There's restrictions to impoundments that you can actually do it in. The fish has to be taken from that impoundment before it can be tagged, and it also has to be tagged in the presence of the agent of the department using this technique approved by the department. So very heavily regulated.
Definitely.
Here in Missouri, but you can do it. I mean, it's something that can be done. What you're saying as far as your guide service throwing a tag in every fish that y'all throw back, I mean, unless that's brought forth by the public saying that this is something that we want, and then we end up doing our research and public comment periods and stuff, that would have to be what would be required to do a regulation change on that. But as of right now, it's just one fish, and it looks like it's restricted to about 5 or 6 impoundments in the state.
Good to know. That's definitely
we do tag our agency tags a lot of fish, and we actually have reward tags on a lot of them. Mississippi River is one that they do a bunch of them. They did a flathead research project on the Mississippi, and they put tags in up to $150. So the tags will always be back right behind the dorsal fin. And they had a lot of returns on them. And it's pretty interesting to see where those fish move, and I know we're talking crappie and catfish, but still, those catfish are absolutely amazing in the distances that they can travel.
Well, I'm going to touch back with Keith Mills, one of the main biologists in the state of Mississippi. He was telling me about a research project they did probably 10, 15 years ago, and they were having crappie move 5 miles a day some days.
That's
unreal.
For crappie.
Yeah,
I mean,
5 miles.
Yep.
And I was like, man, that just blows me away. And he said, you know what? He said exactly to him, he said, but they got nothing to do but swim.
So that's why those crappie wasn't there today.
That's exactly 5 miles.
Hey, we found them yesterday. You heard that story, hadn't
Yeah.
you? We found them yesterday. They ain't there today.
Yeah. I've had it happen. Let's go back to the Department of Wildlife. What are some of the ways you guys keep track of crappie in your impoundments? As far as like electroshock or?
Yes, electrofishing. We do that very regularly, or our fisheries division does that in the spring and the fall. They try not to do it in the heat of the summer because it's stressful for the fish. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all know that, but we have tanks in the boat with aerators, and we do a run for an exact number of minutes, and then once it's over, everybody's scrambling. We're measuring fish. We're taking what we need to do, whether it's catfish and taking a pectoral fin or something like that.
When you do that, are you doing all species of fish at one time, or are you just going after certain species?
It depends on what the research is. So if it's just a straight population survey, then yeah, it's basically everything. If we're wanting to know the health of our largemouth bass population, you might have crappie or brim that's floating up, and they're just going to pick up the bass or something like that. A catfish project, it's actually a whole different frequency, electric frequency, because there's 2 different frequency settings, one for scalefish and one for skinfish. So if you have one, say for the scalefish, you might see a catfish float up, but it's very unlikely.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and you throw the other frequency in there for the skinfish, and what's interesting, when we do the project on the Mississippi River, we actually have 2 boats. We have the electrofishing boat and then what we call a chase boat, because at that lower frequency for the skinfish, you might see a catfish, flathead, big blue or something like that pop up 100 yards from the electrofishing boat.
Just takes that
and
longer.
Then that chase boat will end up running down and grabbing him and picking him up.
How long does those fish actually float before they go back down?
It depends. It's pretty interesting. You want to see a fisheries biologist. When I first started out with the Department of Conservation, I worked with Private Land Services Division, and I helped the fisheries guys a lot. And the one thing that you want to see a biologist get frustrated with is if you try to dip a fish by the tail, because if you touch them with that net and they come back to it, so you got to dip them from the head. And I learned that really quickly with those guys, because they will get onto you. But yeah, it just all depends. It depends on water temperature, clarity, and all that stuff. On how effective it is. Sometimes you might not shock anything up, if you can't get the frequency right. But they do that for the crappie. We do a lot of trap netting.
Is it trap netting still?
The trap netting is very effective for crappie. They'll set them out in the evenings right before dark, and then they'll end up running them the next morning. So a very effective way of finding out what kind of crappie you have in an impoundment.
What are some of the things that they look for when they're doing these surveys?
They're looking for numbers, just sheer numbers, lengths. They're pulling some scales. They're checking age and all that stuff. It's just, but we want to see the health of the fish overall. Or do they look healthy? Do they seem? You say you get a largemouth bass, it's all head and no body. There's something going on there. And it's the same way with the crappie. Are we seeing? And they're doing this every year, so they're keeping data in the spring and the fall. over years and years, and so they realize they have that data and they can see the trends on it, on whether every year for the last 5 years all we've caught is 6-inch crappie. There's some issues there. We need to change something. So, but yeah, they're just the overall health, age class of the fish, and that data is what dictates a regulation change.
Right.
I like I said, I take Wapopello because it's close to us.
Yeah.
We're only an hour away from
a lot of people
Wapopello,
fish it.
and there's a ton of people that fish it. And there's been a public outcry for years that something needs to be done. And it's one of those things with the state. We have to do research. We have to make sure that we're doing the right thing before we end up doing it. So it took us several years, but they had a lot of town hall meetings, public input meetings,
right.
where people showed up, was able to voice their opinion, create a dialogue with the public to make it to see what they want, what they feel, what they see. Those guys. We have a fisheries biologist that's electro fishing and running trap nets for crappie every year. But then you have that guy that lives next to Wapopello that fishes it every day.
Right.
He probably knows that fishery better than the fisheries biologist.
Right.
And we need those guys' input.
Yep.
We need to know what they think, and couple that with the research in order to decide what needs to be done. The regulation change on Wapopello was huge. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely huge. And from...
How long ago was that?
Like I said, I think it was a couple years ago. We had the meetings up until then we had a public comment period, and then it had to be put into regulation. And normally, if it does, it's approved in the fall, and it won't take effect until March. So
right.
I'm thinking that it's been in effect for 2 years now. Now, don't take my absolute word on
right,
it, but
yeah.
it's been relatively recent. Mm-hmm. But the public loved it. I'm talking to guys talking to y'all that are catching a lot bigger fish, but pound and a quarter fish out of Wapopello, that's a pretty good fish out of Wapopello.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's the regulation change that did it. I don't know if we just had perfect conditions for growth, but it looks like it's doing well. So that's a thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that we work with the public a whole lot because we want to know what they think. They're our stakeholders. They're the ones that are using the resource. They're the ones that are seeing everything, that maybe we don't see. So that input is very, very important to us.
I think it's invaluable, and that's why we got you on the show today. Is we want you guys to know that we're here to help you as well. So, we want to know what we can do to input you guys to help your research and everything, be timely and effective for
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yep. Yeah. But like I said, the thing, if you have a certain impoundment it's your favorite one that you fish, whether it's reelfoot or grenada or whatever it may be, get to know your biologists and your wildlife officers too. Get to know those guys, because they're the ones that are doing the research. They're the ones that's out there checking folks. I can't tell you how many times that I've checked people with live wells full of fish, and they're like, "Hey, you're doing your job, but you might not tell anybody that you see me."
Right. Just don't tell that next boat.
Yeah, don't tell the next boat that this guy he was using this jig, and he was in this location or whatever. But we're the ones out there checking folks, and we're the ones that get to make that connection with the public, and I think it's helpful, as far as our department, the success of our natural resources go.
Steve, I know we talked about it earlier a little bit, but Asian carp, has it really affected the crappie fishing on these Mississippi River system? And
well, you hear nightmares about these Asian carp, and I don't know how they really got into our systems. But you heard, what was it, in the 90s, they come out of a farm pond somewhere.
Right, flooded in Arkansas.
Yeah, but
like
when Ronnie and I was in high school, we was commercial fishing with your grandfather. And, we lived on the Mississippi River. And I can remember back in either 1980 or 81, Ronnie and I, we caught these Asian carp. We thought we were catching buffalo in some bushes, and how you run a trammel net around them and drive them out. Yeah. And we caught a few of those. We didn't know what they were. And I believe, if I'm thinking right, Ronnie might have sent one to somebody in Tennessee, the biologist, just to study that fish. But I know they have been in that Mississippi River since the early 80s. But let's take Reelfoot Lake, for instance. It's full of Asian carp.
Okay.
I have fished all winter on Reelfoot Lake, and it is healthy as it's ever been. I mean, it's a bunch of fish in there, and I don't think it affects them a bit.
Really?
You know, it affects your mind by seeing them and everything. You think it's destroying their habitat and stuff. I believe, you know, if anything hurts a body of water like Reelfoot Lake, I believe it's the catfish. You know,
Too many?
there's too many catfish in there. You know, and a lot of times they will destroy a bed.
Yeah.
Are you seeing flathead or in that lake also, or is it just mainly channel?
There's some big flatheads in there, but it's full of channel cat. You know, you can pull up on a big stump, sometimes there'll be 30 swimming around it.
Really?
You know, and if you got a crappie spawning on top of it, I guarantee you there will be a catfish swimming around that stump. But the carp, you know, they're swimming everywhere. I think it bothers us more than it bothers the fish.
I've heard that those carp actually kind of scare crappie off their state beds. Have you seen anything like that?
I've watched the carp come in, and a crappie, he'll move away when he comes through there, but he comes right back. I mean, it don't bother him too much.
Well, definitely, guys, I want to thank you for your time this morning. You know, both you guys are a wealth of knowledge. So, you know, anything else you want to add into them?
No, I just say enjoy yourself, you know, and I know we touched really quick on the live scope stuff. I mean, regulation changes as far as Missouri goes. There's none in the foreseeable future, but it's one of those things that because of we're watching. They're keeping that data, and they're seeing if we're going to see a huge decline in the population. It could affect creel limits in the future, you know. But one of those things, just like Steve said, it's, you know, you're catching that big fish. I mean, especially if you have live scope. I mean, I know guys that every time they go fishing, they're catching a limit now, you know. And you take 20, 30 years ago, only the best did that, you know, and your average man can do that now. So, I mean, you'd be naive to think that's not going to affect the population. The more popular it gets. So use your head. I mean, remember that we're doing this for the future. We're not doing it for now. You know, don't live in the day. Think about the future.
Excellent advice.
Catch and release.
Yeah. If you need it, keep it. If you don't need it, release it.
Take a picture.
Take a picture. But anyway, appreciate you, Steve, as always.
Hey, man, I appreciate y'all. Glad to be here.
All right, we'll see you later.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I could be